Well, hello there, fellow adventurers, and welcome back to our little home on wheels. For anyone new joining us, we're John and Sarah, and this is Gertie, our trusty camper van. A few years ago, we decided that turning 50 wasn't an ending, but a starting line. We traded our house keys for an ignition key, our routine for the open road, and we've been collecting miles and stories ever since. Today's story comes to you from a place that feels like it was pulled from the pages of a fantasy novel, the Scottish Highlands. Ever wonder if a day that starts perfectly can get even better, even when it goes completely wrong? Stick around, because this was one of those days. A day that taught us more about this life than 100 smooth ones ever could. The morning started with a hushed reverence. We had parked Gertie the night before in a small, designated pull-off overlooking Loch Assynt. When I slid open the side door, the air that greeted me was cool and sharp, smelling of damp earth, pine, and something ancient and wild. A thick, silvery mist clung to the surface of the water, obscuring the far shore and giving the ruined castle on its edge the look of a ghostly apparition. There was no sound but the gentle lapping of water and the sleepy chirping of a single, brave bird. "Coffee's on," Sarah's voice was a warm, welcome whisper from inside the van. I slid back inside, the chill of the morning still on my skin. The rich aroma of brewing coffee filled our tiny space, a familiar and comforting ritual that grounds us no matter where in the world we wake up. Sarah was already moving with that practiced efficiency we developed over tens of thousands of miles. She passed me a steaming mug, her smile catching the soft light filtering through the windscreen. "Can you believe this view?" she murmured, gesturing with her own mug towards the loch. "Or, what we can see of it, anyway." "It's magical," I agreed. "It feels like we're the only people in the world." And in that moment, we were. This was the promise of van life fulfilled. Not the curated, perfect images you sometimes see, but the raw, soul-stirring reality of it. The freedom to wake up surrounded by beauty so profound it makes you feel small and infinite all at once. Our plan for the day was gloriously simple: continue our journey along the legendary North Coast 500, a route that winds its way through some of Scotland's most dramatic landscapes. No rush, no itinerary. Just drive, see where the road took us, and find an even more perfect spot, if such a thing existed, to call home for the night. "Ready to roll?" I asked after we'd finished our breakfast of porridge with a dash of local honey. "Almost," she said, tapping a finger on her chin. "You know, we get so many questions about how we make this life work day to day, especially when things don't go to plan. Maybe today, as we go, we can share a few of the little tricks we've learned. The real-life hacks that aren't just about clever storage solutions, but about a mindset." "I love that," I said. The 5 golden rules of a good day on the road. Even if it turns into a bad one, it felt like a good theme for the day. A perfect day to talk about preparing for imperfection. With that, we began our shutdown sequence. The mugs were washed and secured in their custom-built holders. The bedding was folded and stowed away. The pop-top roof was lowered and latched. Every single item in our tiny home has its place, a necessity born from living in 70 square feet. I did my routine walk-around of Gertie, checking the tires, looking for any drips or leaks, a habit that has saved us more than once. Everything looked perfect. I climbed into the driver's seat, turned the key, and Gertie's diesel engine rumbled to life with a familiar, reassuring growl. Sarah was in the passenger seat, our well-worn paper map spread across her lap, a relic in a digital age that we refused to give up. "North, then?" she asked, a familiar sparkle in her eye. "Always north," I replied, putting the van in gear. We pulled out onto the narrow, winding road, the mist beginning to burn off under the strengthening sun, revealing the majestic, heather-streaked mountains that cradled the loch. The day felt full of promise. We were blissfully, wonderfully, and completely unaware of the adventure that was about to find us. The first hour of the drive was pure bliss. The North Coast 500 isn't a road you conquer, it's one you surrender to. It twisted and turned, climbed and fell, revealing a new, breathtaking vista around every bend. We drove with the windows down, the cool Highland air whipping through the cab, a soundtrack of our favorite old folk tunes playing softly on the stereo. We saw shaggy-haired Highland cows grazing placidly by the roadside, their long horns glinting in the sun, and pointed out waterfalls cascading down sheer rock faces in the distance. "This is it," Sarah said, leaning her head back against the seat. "This is the thing. That feeling of just moving. Being untethered." I knew exactly what she meant. It was a feeling we had chased across continents. A potent cocktail of freedom, anticipation, and presence. In our old life, a drive was a means to an end, the commute to work, the trip to the supermarket. Out here, the drive was the destination. We passed through tiny villages, clusters of stone cottages with wisps of smoke curling from their chimneys. We waved at fellow travelers in their own camper vans, a silent acknowledgement of our shared pilgrimage. The road narrowed further, becoming a single track with passing places. It demanded a slower, more considerate pace of driving, a rhythm that suited the landscape perfectly. I was just remarking on how well Gertie was handling the steep inclines when it happened. It wasn't a loud bang or a dramatic screech. It was a dull, metallic clunk that seemed to come from deep within the engine, followed by a sudden, sickening lurch. The power steering died instantly, and the wheel became heavy and unresponsive in my hands. All the cheerful lights on the dashboard blinked off, save for one angry, red battery icon. "What was that?" Sarah asked, her voice tight with alarm. "I don't know," I said, wrestling with the heavy steering to guide Gertie into the next passing place, which was mercifully only a few yards ahead. The van rolled to a stop with a final, defeated sigh. I turned the key. Nothing. Not even a click. Just dead, profound silence, made all the more jarring by the sudden absence of the engine's hum. We looked at each other. The folk music, still playing softly, suddenly sounded mocking. I reached over and turned it off. The silence that rushed in was immense, broken only by the whistling of the wind. We were parked on the side of a mountain, surrounded by a vast, empty landscape of brown and green. There wasn't a house, a farm, or another soul in sight. I pulled my phone from my pocket. As expected, no service. Sarah checked hers. Same result. "Okay," she said, taking a deep breath and letting it out slowly. "So. This is a thing." My first instinct was frustration, a hot wave of it that washed over me. Perfect day, ruined. Stranded. The litany of worries began to cycle through my head. How much would this cost? How would we even get a tow truck out here? How long would we be stuck? "Maybe it's just the battery," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "Maybe a connection came loose on these bumpy roads." "Maybe," Sarah said, but her tone was doubtful. She pulled out the paper map, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Okay, according to this, the nearest village is a place called Drumbeg. It looks to be about 5 or 6 miles from here. Along this road. 5 or 6 miles. Not an impossible walk, but not a pleasant one on a narrow road with no shoulder, especially if we had to walk back." My shoulders slumped. The beautiful, liberating landscape now felt desolate and intimidating. The adventure was over. The problem had begun. Or so I thought. This is the moment, isn't it? The one that separates a trip from a journey. It's the point where the carefully laid plans crumble and you're left with two choices: you can crumble with them, or you can take a deep breath and start building something new from the rubble. For a few long minutes, we just sat there in the silent van, the weight of the situation pressing down on us. The frustration was still simmering in my chest. This was not part of the plan. This was an interruption, a failure. Then Sarah did something that completely shifted the energy. She unbuckled her seatbelt, turned to face me, and said, "Right. Well, we wanted to find a quiet spot for the night. I think we've succeeded." I stared at her, then a slow smile spread across my face. It was absurd. It was ridiculous. And it was exactly what I needed to hear. A bit more permanent than I was hoping for, I chuckled, the tension in my shoulders easing just a little. Okay, she said, switching into her calm, practical mode. Let's not panic. We have food for a week. We have a full tank of water. We have a comfortable bed. We are not stranded. We are temporarily stationary. And that, right there, was the first real hack of the day, the one that underpins all the others. Hack number 1, your van isn't a trap, it's your lifeboat. We had everything we needed to be safe and comfortable for days, if necessary. The breakdown wasn't a disaster, it was just a change of scenery. This shift in perspective was crucial. We weren't victims of our circumstances, we were resourceful travelers facing a logistical puzzle. You're right, I said, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. Let's treat this like a proper campsite. I'll pop the hood and see if I can spot anything obvious. You work your magic. I grabbed my headlamp and a small tool roll from the back of the van. While not a trained mechanic, I'd spent enough time with Gertie's engine to know my way around the basics. As I propped open the hood, I could hear Sarah behind me, moving with quiet efficiency. The familiar clink of mugs, the slide of a drawer, the soft thud of our camping chairs being placed outside. She was turning our breakdown spot into a home. This led directly to the second principle we live by on the road. Hack number 2, be prepared, not just for the good days, but for the bad ones. Our toolkit isn't just a wrench and a screwdriver. It's a comprehensive set we've built up over time, including a multimeter for testing electrical faults, a set of socket wrenches, spare fuses, zip ties, and the holy grail of roadside repairs, a roll of duct tape. I started with the most obvious culprit, the battery terminals. They were clean and tight. I followed the wires, checking for anything that looked loose, frayed, or out of place. Meanwhile, Sarah was demonstrating hack number 3, maintain comfort and routine, especially in a crisis. Panic thrives in chaos. Routine starves it. Instead of pacing anxiously, she set up our little outdoor living room. She put on the kettle for a cup of tea. She got out the cheese and crackers. By the time I'd spent 20 minutes staring blankly at a collection of hoses and wires that all looked stubbornly normal, she had created an oasis of calm next to our stricken vehicle. I wiped my greasy hands on a rag and slumped into one of the chairs. I've got nothing, I admitted, feeling a fresh wave of discouragement. It's not the battery. It's not any of the fuses I can see. It could be the alternator, the starter motor, it could be anything. Sarah handed me a cup of tea. That's okay, she said calmly. You tried. Now we drink our tea. Then we make a new plan. As we sat there, sipping our tea in the vast, silent landscape, a strange sense of peace began to settle over me. The initial panic had subsided, replaced by a quiet acceptance. This was our reality for now. And honestly, it wasn't so bad. The sun was warm, the view was still spectacular, and I was with my best friend. We were handling it. It was then that we heard it. A distant, sputtering rumble. A sound that was music to our ears. A vehicle. We both jumped to our feet, peering down the long, empty stretch of road. A few minutes later, a battered, dark green Land Rover, probably older than I was, came chugging up the hill towards us. It slowed as it approached, the driver, a figure in a tweed cap, leaning out to get a better look at our setup. Hope, bright and brilliant, surged through me. Maybe our new plan was about to arrive. The old Land Rover pulled up alongside us with a final, juddering cough, as if it too were on its last legs. The engine cut out, and an elderly man with a face like a weathered map of Scotland itself levered himself out of the driver's seat. He wore a thick wool jumper despite the sunshine, and his eyes, a startlingly bright blue, crinkled at the corners as he surveyed our little domestic scene. Bit of bother? He asked, his voice a gravelly baritone, thick with a Highland accent that was both charming and slightly difficult to decipher. "You could say that," I said, walking over with what I hoped was a friendly, non-threatening smile. "She just died on us. Won't start." He ambled over to our open engine bay, peering inside with an expression of intense concentration. He didn't touch anything at first, just looked, his head tilted. He reminded me of a doctor examining a patient. "I'm John, by the way. This is my wife, Sarah." "Angus," he grunted, not taking his eyes off the engine. He pointed a gnarled finger. "Try the key now." I hopped back into the driver's seat and turned the ignition. Nothing. Just silence. "Again," he commanded. I tried it again. Angus leaned further into the engine bay, his ear close to the alternator. He muttered to himself. "Just as I thought." He straightened up and looked at me. "It's your alternator. The belt is fine, but the connections come loose. A common thing on these bumpy roads if it's not seated just right. Give me a moment." He walked back to his own vehicle and returned with a small, greasy tool bag that looked like it had seen service in multiple wars. With a confidence that I deeply envied, he reached into Gertie's metallic guts. There was a bit of wiggling, a soft click, and the scraping sound of a wrench tightening a nut. The whole operation took less than 2 minutes. "Right," he said, wiping his hands on an already filthy rag he produced from his back pocket. "Try her now, son." I held my breath and turned the key. The engine sputtered once, twice, and then roared to life. The dashboard lit up like a Christmas tree. The power steering whined as it re-engaged. It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. Sarah let out a whoop of joy. I just sat there, laughing with sheer, unadulterated relief. I jumped out of the van, my hand extended. "Angus, I can't thank you enough. You're a lifesaver. Please, let us give you something for your time." I was already reaching for my wallet. He waved my hand away, a firm but not unkind gesture. "Och, put that away. We look after folks out here. No need for payment." This was the moment that crystallized everything for us. It was the peak of the experience, born directly from the trough of our despair. And it gave us our next, and perhaps most important, travel hack. Hack number 4, never underestimate the kindness of strangers, and don't be too proud to accept it. We could have decided to walk the 6 miles. We might have eventually found help. But by staying put and being open to the possibility of connection, the solution came to us. "We have to do something," Sarah insisted, coming forward. "Can we make you a cup of tea? A sandwich?" A genuine smile finally broke through his gruff exterior. "A cup of tea would be grand, lass." Grand. So that's what we did. We sat there, on the side of a remote Highland road, and shared tea and biscuits with the man who had rescued us. He told us stories about his life as a sheep farmer in the area, pointing out hills and valleys and naming them. He had lived here his entire life, his family for generations before him. As he got ready to leave, he looked at our map spread on the camping table. "Where are you heading for the night?" he asked. "We're not sure," Sarah replied. "Just hoping to find a nice spot to pull over." He squinted at the map, then shook his head. "All the spots on this road will be full of tourists by now. Look," he traced a thin, almost invisible line on the map with his finger. "You go on about 3 miles, past Drumbeg. You'll see a small track on your left, just after a stone bridge. Looks like nothing. You take that. It goes for about a mile down to the sea. There's a wee bay there. Sand and everything. Nobody goes there. You'll have it all to yourselves." This information felt like a treasure. It was knowledge you could never find in a guidebook or on an app. It was a gift. "Thank you, Angus. For everything," I said, my voice thick with gratitude. Well," he said, tipping his cap. "Just pay it forward. That's the way of it. He climbed back into his ancient Land Rover, and with a wave and a cloud of exhaust fumes, he was gone, chugging off down the road. We stood there for a moment in stunned silence. The day had been a roller coaster. From the serene beauty of the morning to the sharp panic of the breakdown, and now this, an act of pure, selfless generosity and a secret whispered on the wind. The breakdown hadn't been an interruption to our journey. It had been the gateway to the most authentic part of it. We packed up our little tea party setup, a sense of giddy excitement bubbling between us. Everything was stowed securely, but this time, the feeling was different. It wasn't just about being tidy, it was about preparing for a new, unexpected adventure. We were no longer just following a line on a map, we were following a story. I started Gertie's engine again, just to hear that beautiful, healthy rumble. It worked. We were mobile. We were free. And we had a secret destination. Ready for the real adventure to begin? Sarah asked, her eyes shining. You know it, I replied. We pulled back onto the North Coast 500, not with the easy contentment of the morning, but with a deeper, richer sense of gratitude and wonder. The landscape, which had felt so intimidating just an hour before, was once again our beautiful, welcoming playground. We drove slowly, carefully, my ears attuned to every little sound from the engine. But Gertie purred along perfectly. We passed through the tiny, picturesque village of Drumbeg, and just as Angus had said, about a mile later we saw the old stone bridge. And right after it, a narrow, unmarked track leading off to the left. It was so unassuming we would have driven right past it a million times. This has to be it, I said, a thrill of discovery running through me. Turn. Turn. Sarah urged, laughing. I swung Gertie onto the dirt track. It was bumpy and overgrown, clearly not a road meant for heavy traffic. It wound its way downhill, through thickets of gorse and windswept trees. For a moment, I wondered if we'd misunderstood, if this track just led to a farmer's field. But we trusted Angus. We kept going. And then, the track opened up. We emerged from the trees and stopped, both of us speechless. Below us was a perfect crescent of white sand, lapped by turquoise water so clear we could see the rocks on the seabed. The tiny bay was sheltered on three sides by rugged, heather-clad cliffs. And it was completely, utterly deserted. There wasn't a single other person, vehicle, or sign of human life. It was our own private paradise. He wasn't kidding, Sarah whispered, her voice filled with awe. We drove the last few yards onto a flat, grassy patch just above the beach, the perfect place to park. The moment I turned off the engine, the only sound was the gentle shushing of the waves on the shore and the cry of a distant seagull. The sun was beginning its slow descent towards the horizon, casting a golden, buttery light over the entire scene. We got out of the van and just stood there, breathing it all in. This was a gift. A reward we hadn't earned but had been given freely. The stress of the breakdown, the frustration, the worry, it all melted away, replaced by a profound sense of peace and overwhelming gratitude. This is where our fifth and final hack for the day truly came into play. It's one we try to live by every single day, but it felt especially poignant here. Hack number 5, embrace the detour. Our meticulously unplanned day had been thoroughly derailed. And that derailment had led us to a place more beautiful than any we could have hoped to find on our own. It's a lesson life on the road teaches you again and again, the best things happen when you let go of the script. As the light began to fade, we set up our proper camp for the night. We put out our chairs facing the sea and got to work on dinner. Sarah made a simple but delicious pasta, the steam rising into the cool evening air. We ate in comfortable silence, watching the sky shift from gold to pink to a deep, velvety purple. After dinner, I brought out our portable fire pit. It's a crucial piece of our kit, allowing us to have a small, safe, contained fire without scorching the earth, leaving no trace behind. We lit a small blaze with some driftwood we gathered from the beach, and sat close together, the warmth of the flames chasing away the evening chill. Can you believe this morning? I said, staring into the dancing flames. It feels like a week ago. I know, Sarah replied, her face illuminated by the firelight. When the van died, I really thought, well, that's it. Day ruined. Me too. I was so angry. At the van, at the road, at the whole situation. But it wasn't ruined, was it? She said softly. It was, remade. That whole experience with Angus, it was worth the 2 hours of panic. We sat there for a long time, talking about the day. We reflected on our old lives, on how a car breakdown would have been a catastrophe. It would have meant missed appointments, angry phone calls to insurance companies, a cascade of stress that would have soured the entire week. We would have seen it as nothing but a problem to be solved, an inconvenience to be endured. But out here, it was different. Out here, it was part of the story. The challenge wasn't an obstacle to the experience, it was the experience. It had forced us to rely on our own resourcefulness, to lean on each other, and ultimately, to open ourselves up to the kindness of a stranger. It had transformed us from passive tourists driving through a landscape into active participants in its daily life. This, we realized, was the core philosophy of why we chose this life after 50. It wasn't about escaping problems. Problems find you wherever you are. It was about changing our relationship with them. It was about building a life with enough resilience, flexibility, and trust to be able to see a breakdown not as an end, but as an unexpected beginning. The hacks we had joked about that morning weren't just clever tips for camping. They were a blueprint for a way of life. Be prepared, not just with tools, but with a calm mind. Create comfort, because a cup of tea can solve almost anything. Embrace community, because the world is full of good people. And above all, trust the detour, because the most beautiful destinations are rarely on the main road. The fire burned down to glowing embers, and the sky above us exploded with a dazzling display of stars, unobscured by any city lights. The Milky Way was a luminous smear across the heavens. It was a humbling, magnificent sight. This is why we do this, I said, putting my arm around Sarah. For moments exactly like this one. The ones you can't plan for. And the ones you have to earn a little bit, she added, leaning her head on my shoulder. We felt a deep contentment, a sense of having been tested and found not wanting. Our relationship, already strong, felt even more solid, forged in the quiet crucible of shared adversity and shared joy. We had faced the unexpected together and had come out the other side not just unscathed, but enriched. Tomorrow, we decided, we would continue our journey north. But first, we'd make a small detour of our own. We'd find a shop, buy the best bottle of single malt whiskey we could find, and leave it on Angus's doorstep with a thank you note. It was the only way to honor his rule, pay it forward. That's the way of it. So there you have it. A story about a breakdown that turned into a breakthrough. It's a perfect example of what this life is all about. It's not always easy, it's certainly not always predictable, but it is always, always an adventure. It's about learning to find the beauty not just in the perfect sunset, but in the kindness of a stranger on a lonely road. It's about realizing that being stranded can sometimes be the best way to find out exactly where you're meant to be. We hope this little story brought a bit of that magic to you today. Maybe it sparked a little bit of your own wanderlust, or maybe it just reminded you that the best parts of life often lie just beyond the edge of our plans. We'd love to hear in the comments about a time a travel mishap turned into one of your favorite memories. Your stories always inspire us. Thanks for joining us on this little piece of our journey. We'll see what tomorrow brings, but we know it will be an adventure. Until next time, be safe, be kind, and keep living fully, 1 mile, and 1 story, at a time.